Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. If you've read Think and Grow Rich, and most likely you've read it because you hear me mention it a lot in my videos, then you'll recognize that there are the very clear-cut principles to achieving success. Napoleon Hill dedicated his entire life to figuring out what these principles are, and he put them in the book. The story of how he went about creating the book is equally as fascinating as the principles outlined. And these principles are universal principles that are apparent and applicable and instilled at a deep unconscious level as automatic actions to those people who have a lot of success in their lives. So it would make sense then to take these principles and apply it, checklist style, every day, 24 hours a day for the rest of your life. It would make sense to do so. However, a lot of people have read Think and Grow Rich, but yet they have not created the results they want in life. What is preventing them? What is preventing them? Well, if you've been watching my videos, I've been talking a lot about the subconscious mind. So the truth is in the subconscious mind. You can give people the principles, you can give them the strategies, you can tell them exactly what to do. But if there is conflicting programming in the subconscious mind, they will find some way to mess it up. So thus, we need to go in and work on our subconscious mind. We need to change the programming in there. 1 year after the book was released, Napoleon Hill created the book Outwitting the Devil. However, it was never released, and for obvious reasons. When you're going to release a book like Outwitting the Devil, you can only imagine the kind of resistance and whatever is going on, not only internal, but one would experience if they release a book like this. Okay, because there's a lot of qualms surrounding people using the word devil. Now, many years later, recently actually, the book was released. And contained within it, whether you are Christian or religious or atheist or whatever, spiritual, contained within this book is the wisdom to outwit an aspect of yourself that is preventing you from implementing the success principles covered in Think and Grow Rich. And that's what we're going to talk about today. This is the companion for Think and Grow Rich. If Think and Grow Rich clearly outline the principles, then Outwitting the Devil is the way to make sure you automatically do those things to outwit that aspect of yourself that is preventing you from getting the results that you want, whether you believe in a devil or not. In the Kabbalah, they talk about how we're born into this planet with a sparring partner that's within ourselves. And this sparring partner essentially is there to grow us, hits us in many different areas psychologically so that we can overcome ourselves. And once we overcome that sparring partner, which spars with us for our entire life, we will enjoy the fruits of what they call heaven on earth, or the success that's talked about in Think and Grow Rich, whether it be financial riches, prosperity in whatever area of your life. That has got to be the net result of outwitting the devil, overcoming the aspect of yourself that is there to, in a way, prevent you from getting success. But if you follow the Kabbalah, they talk about how this is not there to prevent you from getting success, but is there to raise you to a higher level of wit and understanding and wisdom to move you towards success. Whatever way you want to look at it, it's still the same. In Buddhism, the Buddha, before he experienced enlightenment, was confronted by Mara, the demon. And by maintaining presence and not getting thrown off by the different seductions of Mara prior to seeing Mara, and the very scary appearance of Mara, he just maintained presence and looked at him as if nothing, nothingness. He then saw himself, and that's how he experienced enlightenment. So thus, your journey in life is to outwit this devil, this aspect that exists within yourself that is preventing you from getting the results that you want. So in Outwitting the Devil, Napoleon Hill goes deep into his subconscious mind to find this entity in which he has a clear-cut conversation with it. And contained within the transcription of this conversation are the very elements that you can take and implement to outwit your own devil that's within yourself that is preventing you from getting the results you want. This book has easily become one of my favorite books, and I will continuously reread it because remember, the devil is constantly, and I'm going to use that as a framework, not trying to be religious or anything like that. I'm just going to use it as a framework because that's what the book discusses. The devil is trying to prevent you from getting the results that you want. And if it's constantly trying to get you off course, essentially drifting. We'll talk about that in a moment. And your job is to all the time recognize that it's constantly raising the bar to get you to go in a different direction. And you absolutely must become clever and understand the ways that it does so. And you must dedicate your time to outwit it all throughout the day. This will go on as your success goes higher and higher and higher and higher. If you meet anyone who has a high level of success, as much as on the surface they look like everything is in order, believe me, they battle their own devil. Believe me, I'm constantly battling mine every day. So I have not met anyone, even at a insanely high level of success, who is not constantly overcoming this aspect within their self called the devil. Next, from Christ on down to Edison, the men who have achieved most have been those who met with the most stubborn forms of temporary defeat. So essentially, the devil is there to create temporary defeat and masquerade it as permanent defeat. This would seem to justify the conclusion that infinite intelligence has a plan, or a law, by which it hurdles men over many obstacles before giving them the privilege of leadership or the opportunity to render useful service in a noteworthy fashion. You cannot want success by just saying, I want success. The moment you say you want success, that's when the games begin. Okay? That's when you're going to be outwitting the devil. The moment you sit down and you read Think and Grow Rich and say, I'm going to apply it, that's when the games begin. All right? That's when now these principles are going to come to your aid. And we'll talk about the 7 principles in a moment. Most real failures are due to limitations which men set up in their own minds. Okay? Most real failures are due to limitations which men set up in their own minds. You are now completely in charge of your other self. You are entitled to know that 2 entities occupy your body, as in fact, 2 similar entities occupy the body of each living person on earth. One of these entities is motivated by and responds to the impulse of fear. The other is motivated by the response to the impulse of faith. For more than a year, you have been driven like a slave by the fear entity. Take an inventory of your life right now and be real and honest with yourself and see where you are being driven by fear. When you realize that there are many areas, no matter what level of success you're at, where you're driven by fear, you can then say, where is this fear coming from? And if you can create a model in your mind of these entities and say, one is favorable with you and the other is the devil, essentially trying to get you to live in fear, well, now you know who your enemy is. And Sun Tzu said this, once you know who your enemy is and you understand the tactics and the strategies deployed by the enemy, you don't have to worry about losing a battle. You see, they say that the devil's greatest accomplishment is the facade that A, he doesn't exist, number 1. Number 2, masquerading around like a being of light. Masquerading around like a being of light. And you'll see this with a lot of people who claim to be enlightened or claim to be, spiritual, but yet they do a lot of things to harm people and harm themselves. Okay? That's the masquerading. Now, the masquerading, that's external. The real masquerading happens internal. Why do you not try to stop me from publishing this confession I'm wiring to you? Napoleon Hill asked the devil. And by the way, this was a transcript, as I mentioned earlier, so we're going to pull points, and we're talking from the transcription perspective, plus I pull my own points and reworded it in relation to what I believe is going to be valuable for you based on the kind of videos that I produce and the kind of information that you are interested in. There's a lot to this book. I'm just scratching the surface and pulling out this high-level points. So it is recommended that you read this book. And it's recommended that you read it multiple times at different stages of your life, because you're going to recognize that this witting goes on for a long time. It goes on forever. Thus, you'll always be outwitting the devil. And you always need to equip yourself with the best ways to outwit it so you can move, even if it's incremental or sometimes quantum, towards the success that you want. So he says, because that would be the surest way to guarantee you will publish it, I have better plans than try to suppress publications of my confession. I will urge you to go ahead with the publication and then sit back and watch you suffer when some of my faithful drifters begin to make things hot for you. I will not need to deny your story. My followers will do that for me, see if they don't. So what he means by this, my interpretation, is that when you start to understand the principles of this book, you're going to start thinking differently. And if you go around telling people about this, get ready to be confronted by their own inner demons, okay? And they don't realize that they're doing it. So thus, the more you study this information, the more you continue down the path of success and moving down the path of personal development and working on yourself, working on your subconscious mind, the more you're going to recognize that people just don't do these kind of things. People just accept life the way it is, okay? They blame things on others. They see everything as luck and chance, and they don't really do a lot of work on themselves. So when you do work on yourself and you think this way, get ready to be ridiculed, get ready to, some people even physically attack you. But that's when you get better at learning how to preemptively place yourself in, or preemptively know where there are going to be situations that are going to hurt you physically, mentally, or emotionally, and prevent yourself from being there. Know the difference of a person that you can connect with. And we can connect with all different kinds of people, but it's how deep can you build a connection. Ideally, you'd want to build very deep connections. But the deeper you build with connections with people, the more influence they have on you, and you don't know what's influencing them until you understand these principles, and thus you might be allowing some of the negative influence in their demons to enter your mind and essentially collaborate and build upon the demon within yourself to cause you both to drift. And we'll talk about drifting later. So thus, very important, the 48 laws of power. The 38th law. Think as you like, but behave like others. Your job is not to change people by forcing them or confronting them. That's not what you have to do. Win through your actions, not your arguments. If you're going to have discussions, do it in a mastermind setting or speak to your audience, as I'm doing right now. I don't go around having these discussions with people. I will have conversations with people, and if I sense that they're on the same wavelength, then boom, we're getting into a discussion like this. It's inevitable. And we're going to work together to outwit our own demons. That's how it works. But the more you understand and implement this information, the more nuanced and sophisticated the outwitting needs to be. And this involves not only the outwitting within yourself, but the outwitting that occurs when you're interacting with people who are controlled by their demons. Okay, a lot of people are so heavily influenced and controlled by their demons that they think they are themselves, but they're actually so under the influence of that demon that if you come in contact with them, you will trigger them in all kinds of ways, and they'll attack you mentally, verbally, all kinds of ways. And your job is to not look for that, okay? Is to blend in a way where they don't get triggered. Some people you can have discussions with, a lot of people you can't. That's how it is. So let's talk about the 7 principles. If you want to outwit the devil, these 7 principles outlined in the book are going to help you get there. First is definiteness of purpose. Definiteness of purpose. Definiteness of purpose is the starting point of all achievement. Without a purpose and a plan, people drift aimlessly through life. Okay, drift aimlessly through life. The devil works this way. As soon as you leave your mind unoccupied, it goes and creates these different thoughts and desires and whatever else to steer you off course. So the key is to be purposeful with everything you do. Everything has to be purposeful. And the higher the level of success, the more purposeful you have to be. You have to be literally, quote unquote, busy, but not busy doing useless things. highest and best use, doing the things that move you forward towards your purpose. Watch my video that I did on Brian Tracy's book, Eat the Frog. Put a link in the description. Next, it seems that you go out of your way to keep people from thinking. That's the question that was asked. And a lot of these questions that I have, actually all of them that I've noted here, are going to be exact pulled quotes from the book, and we'll discuss it from that perspective. Yes, accurate thought is death to me. I cannot exist in the minds of those who think accurately. I do not mind people who thinking as long as they think in terms of fear, discouragement, hopelessness, and destructiveness. When they begin to think in constructive terms of faith, courage, hope, and definiteness of purpose, they immediately become allies of my opposition and are therefore lost to me. So, cannot exist in the minds of those who think accurately. Okay, accurately is being clear on what it is you want in every area of your life. Clarity. Okay? And when you're uncertain, most people think like, okay, they can leave room for uncertainty. Well, it's okay in a way. In earlier stages of life, you gotta figure out what you want, so you can have some uncertainty. That's fine. But understand something: the more uncertainty you have, uncertainty is the weak area in which the devil penetrates. So thus, if you have more certainty, and people might not like you for that. They might say, "Oh, this person is so, narrow-minded and so rigid." They might not like it, but perhaps they don't like it because it's the devil in them that doesn't like it. Perhaps by essentially wanting you to be flimsy, they can infect your mind with their nonsense that's generated by the devil, which is not even really them. And they don't really realize they're doing this. So thus, when in doubt, be clear. Either go for a firm yes or a firm no. If you're in the earlier stages of life and you're trying to figure things out, yes, you can be open, but aim for clarity in all things. At a certain point in your life, you will get clarity. That's why Napoleon talks about, most people don't really have the success mindset until they've hit 40. Because in earlier stages, prior to 40, you're trying to figure things out. So thus you're drifting, you're going off course, you're making mistakes. But most people, when they get to 40, well, I don't say most people, but people who have been practicing this, when they get to 40, they know exactly what they want. Some will achieve this earlier. Some will achieve success in some areas and drift in other areas. The key is to be eventually at a point, and aim for this, where you're absolutely clear on what you want and you will not deviate, and you know exactly the steps you take to get there. And when you take the steps, the different optimizations that occur, and you'll optimize based on those steps, what you need to do, the important areas of your life, how to dedicate the different parts of your day to contribute towards that area. And all the things you're doing are based on faith, courage, hope, and definiteness of worthy purpose and ideal. Okay, watch my video I did on Earl Nightingale's The Stranger's Secret. I'll put a link in the description for that. And if you're definite on purpose, but it's based on fear and discouragement and hopelessness, well, then you're going down a dark path. If you're cold and rigid, based on fear, discouragement, hopelessness, and destructiveness, you're going down a dark path. If you're firm on your beliefs and you operate with 85, 90% of faith, courage, hope, there's a small percentage that's fear and discouragement, then you're still open for the rigidity to cause you to be led astray, because by being too rigid, you essentially prevent information from coming in. So there's a lot of complexity behind this, but the truth is that if you litmus test all your thoughts and see if they're related to faith, courage, hope, and definiteness of purpose towards a worthy ideal, then you're not going to drift, okay? Because the devil can only exist in the minds of those that worship the devil through fear, discouragement, hopelessness, and destructiveness. You don't have to say, I worship the devil. You could say, fear, discouragement, hopelessness, and destructiveness are thoughts in my mind, and you, as a result, worship the devil. Is the habit of definiteness a permanent protection against your control? No, by all means. Definiteness closes the door of one's mind to me only as long as that person follows the principles as a matter of policy. Once the person hesitates, procrastinates, or becomes indefinite about anything, He is just one step removed from my control. Okay? So that's the key. Look at all the areas of your life where you're hesitating, procrastinating, and or indefinite. And we all have them, depending on the level that you're at. I know I have them, and I'm working on them. And I also recognize, after going through this book, that until they are addressed, they are a step closer to being under the control of the devil and drift, and could, with time, compounded with time, essentially get you to go off course. Okay, compounding with time. Watch my video I did on the compound effect by Darren Hardy. Link I'll put in the bottom of the description. Can a person who moves with definiteness of both plan and purpose be always sure of success? No. The best plans sometimes misfire, but the person who moves with definiteness recognizes the difference between temporary defeat and failure. When plans fail, he substitutes others, but he does not change his purpose. He perseveres. Eventually, he finds a plan that succeeds. So what happens is when you got a definiteness of purpose and you start moving forward, you'll be met with temporary defeat. Things might not work out. That's why during those situations, you have to recognize the importance of optimization. You optimize and you figure out what you did right, what you did wrong, how to optimize. You don't give up. And it's through the optimization where you find what is going to work for you at the right time. But the key is that you can never give up, okay? Never give up, ever. For your entire life, you need to be dedicated towards your purpose. I made a commitment to myself that I would be dedicated to my clear-cut purpose, which I have written, which I'm clear about, forever. And I will continuously be, as Earl Nightingale talks about, progressively realizing this worthy ideal. And as I'm doing it, I'm going to be optimizing. So I get better and better each day. And that's definiteness of purpose. And with that, the less likelihood of you drifting and moving into the control of the devil. So having a definiteness of purpose is very important. It starts with that. I suggest that if you don't have absolute definiteness and clarity in all areas of your life, that you make that a priority and you go to work on that right away. And understand that it may take some time, but make it a priority so that you can achieve that definiteness of purpose in all your areas as fast as possible, because that's going to prevent the drifting. Next, let's talk about mastery of self. How do you gain control of the minds of the people? Well, that's easy. I merely move in and occupy the unused space of the human brain. I sow the seeds of negative thought in the minds of people so I can occupy and control the space. Now ask yourself this question. When you allow your mind to just wander, how many times does it wander onto negative information? How many times do you attract negative news or listen to gossip or fill it with mind-numbing television that instills negativity in you? Or I'm not saying all television is bad, but you know what I'm talking about. How many times when that space is open in your mind does it drift towards negativity? A lot. I know that personally. Thus, I do not leave any space open, okay? I do my morning routine and I go to work, and after I'm done work, I'm conscious about the activities till I go to sleep. Because if I don't, no matter how long you've been doing this stuff for, no matter what level of success you have, the opening shows up and negativity seeps in. And when the negativity seeps in, those are seeds. And believe me, those seeds will get watered. And as they compound with time, that watering, it'll start to generate certain actions. And it can unravel your success. Next, tell me about the most common habits by which you control the minds of people. One of my cleverest tricks is that I enter the minds of people through thoughts which they believe to be their own. Okay, very interesting. You'll meet a lot of people who are negative thinkers. They don't realize the extent of their negativity. It's masqueraded in light, and they might even think it's positive. And you'll see this. And they believe that they came up with the thoughts on their own. They'll believe it. And they believe that they're doing the right thing. They might even believe that they're following intuition and following their heart. But if you can't litmus test how that is a positive related element to the positivity components, not just to yourself and others, then most likely you're drifting. Those most useful to me are fear, superstition, greed, lust, revenge, anger, vanity, and just plain laziness. Laziness. Okay, so this is a very important distinction. If you have all these other areas on point, that you are not angry, you don't have lust, you don't have greed, you don't have no revenge or anything like that, and you are just lazy, boom, you're open. You cannot be lazy. Everything should be purposeful, including the rest. Fine, meditation, that's not laziness. Or conscious relaxation, going for a walk, going and enjoying a day with the park, in a park with your friends. Doing things like going for a drive, those might appear to be laziness, but they're not. They're rejuvenation exercises, and they're conscious. And during the time, you're not influenced, you're not putting yourself in negative environments where you're being influenced by negativity around you. Okay? Laziness can show up in many areas of your life, but you know when you're being lazy. And when you are being lazy, you're leaving yourself open for the negative influence. Through one or more of these, I enter the mind at any age, but I get my best results when I take charge of the mind while it's young. Now, interesting, if you look around today, technology and just modern society has made a lot of kids lazy. Okay, they're overweight. They're not really doing anything to occupy the mind for the most part, except playing certain video games or doing certain things that are consistently bombarding their brain with advertisements, which may not be products or services that are actually beneficial for them. The media is programming their mind to get them to amplify certain desires like greed, lust, revenge, anger, etc. All these things are happening in a time in our society where we have so much opportunity. We have right now so much opportunity to create success for ourselves. Yet, there's a dark side to it. The dark side is the current reality we live in. If you live in Western culture, it breeds laziness. It breeds laziness because things are just handed to us, and we still take it for granted, and we still ask for more. Now, I'm not using this as a platform to vent. I'm using this as a reality check. Okay, the truth is that right now, for the most part, you have far more opportunity than you think, and thus you have the power to implement these principles that are not only contained within this book, but also Think and Grow Rich, to create the results you want. And by the way, it doesn't matter if you want to create financial wealth in your life, if it's relationships or whatever it is, the principles covered within this book and Think and Grow Rich can help you get whatever your definition of success is. Okay? Now, when you've gotten to a point where you're going to have children or you're going to be involved with dealing with children, ensure that you're doing your part to help them understand this. Okay? One important element to keep in consideration is that I think it's kind of tougher for kids because their friends are raised by parents or in circumstances where they're not instilled by this. So it's kind of tough being a kid. I remember what it's like. If you're a grown-up watching this and you're in your, let's say, 20s, 30s, you recognize that a lot of work you're doing right now is removing the programming that you got when you were a kid because you were so innocent, your mind was open, and a lot of people around you were doing things that were messing themselves up, and you thought that maybe that was the right thing to do. Drifting with the devil. Drifting with the devil. So I can best define the word drift by saying that people who think for themselves never drift, while those who do little or no thinking for themselves are drifters. A drifter is one who permits himself to be influenced and controlled by circumstances outside of his mind. He would rather let me occupy his mind and do his thinking than go to the trouble of thinking for himself. A drifter is one who accepts whatever life throws his way without making a protest or putting up a fight. He doesn't know what he wants from life, and he spends all of his time getting just that. A drifter has a lot of opinions, but they are not his own. Again, he might think they are his own. And honestly, it doesn't really matter. As you mentioned this earlier, what matters is that you're aware of this and you're observing when people give you their opinions and recognize when their opinions are really theirs. It comes from a good, authentic, helpful place, or it's a disempowering opinion that's there from their own demons trying to connect with your demons to bring you down. Most of them are supplied by me. A drifter is one who is too lazy mentally to use his own brain. That is the reason I take control of people's mind, people's thinkings, and plant my own seeds in their mind. So look at, I was talking about the youth of today, and just people in general today. How much nonsense are we consuming that actually prevents us from using critical thinking in our brain nowadays? Think about that for a moment, okay? The food we eat, the information we consume, the collective consciousness of laziness, that social proof is in our brain, which is a trigger. I recommend that you read Influence, Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. Those triggers, the trigger of social proof is essentially saying, oh, everybody's lazy, so you can be lazy. Everybody's just chilling and doesn't really act from a place of consciousness, doesn't really live 24 hours a day, thinking about what are the things that are purposeful and doing only those things. And when they're restful, even when they're sleeping, they're making sure that it's a proper restful situation. All this kind of thing. I'm not saying work 24 hours a day. I'm saying 24 hours a day is when you can be influenced. You can even be influenced while you're sleeping subconsciously. That's been known to happen. And so thus, you need to be consciously aware of when the situations where your guard is down, that it's a safe space so that you're not programmed by this negativity that will then evoke that aspect of yourself that will further the negativity. So when you look around and you see that a lot of people are living out of laziness, they're eating the junk food, they're talking gossip, they're associating with people that are negative, and they're just plain being lazy with a lot of things in their life, your social proof in your brain is thinking, that aspect, that trigger in your brain is saying that that's okay. So you need to remove that out of your existence. That's a really important element. So that's what the devil's greatest trick is to do, is to get us to drift. A person that is on purpose and is on point with the things that they do, and they move on from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, and what they do is conscious and highest and best use, and moving towards their outcome, is less likely to drift because they're in control of their reality. If you don't control your reality, you leave yourself open to being drifted. And the drifting comes internally, but is contributed externally by your environment, by other drifters. Those that do not drift will not tolerate your driftingness. I personally do not like to be around people that are drifting unless they want to get out of drifting and they hire me for consulting or whatever to help them not drift, then that's okay. But even then, I make sure that I do not get entangled in their drifting ways, and I don't let their subconscious clever ways to influence me to move down their direction. So let's look at the anatomy of a drifter, some components. The first thing you notice about a drifter is his total lack of a major purpose in life. Now, does this make a drifter a bad person? No. It just means that a drifter is a person that is leaving themselves open to be influenced down a negative path. And thus, when we look at these different components here that make up a drifter, we have to make sure that we are not partaking in any of these. Okay, so if you don't have a major purpose in life, pick something and get started right now. More doors will open. Or go out and find a purpose in life. Or create one. Just create one, because at least that will allow you to use your brain, to think critically, to see pattern recognition, to be able to consciously evaluate and stimulate and actually build the neural pathways and the synapses and all these different kinds of things. Exercise the brain so you're not allowing yourself to just drift into advertising or negativity that is not beneficial, advertising that's not beneficial for you, negativity, gossip, just useless things that, by the way, a lot of advertisers have information that they're trying to get you to pay attention to bring them down a funnel that's not to your benefit, to consume the unhealthy food, the unhealthy information, and so forth. And when you're drifting and you don't have a purpose in life, you'll get attracted to that kind of information. And you'll move down that pathway, further drifting. He will be conspicuous in his lack of self-confidence. Self-confidence is developed by having purpose in life. And your self-confidence goes up as you make incremental gains and quantum leaps in that pursuit of your purpose. And as you hit your goals, your self-confidence goes up higher. The micro goals, the self-confidence goes up higher. Then you set higher and higher goals, and it keeps going and going and going. Your self-confidence gets higher. He will never accomplish anything requiring thought and effort. Okay? A lot of people want things handed to them in varying degrees. The key is to take as much responsibility as you can and put in the effort and thought in the process. He'll be ill-tempered and lacking in control of his emotions. He will have opinions on everything but accurate knowledge of nothing. He'll be narrow-minded and intolerant on all subjects, ready to crucify those who may disagree with him. Now, I brought up an interesting point earlier of think as you'd like, but act like everyone else. 38 of the 48 laws of power. One of the best ways of being in reality is to be open-minded and listen to people, but at the same time internally filter what is good and useful towards your purpose and what is not. And do not get to the point where you need to fight or argue with someone. Instead, make the result happen. That requires more skill. Actually making the result happen versus arguing, two different things. Okay? If you find yourself getting tense when you're having conversations with people who are disagreeing with you, then you don't got a lot of self-confidence. You don't have a strong frame. You don't really have a definite purpose. You don't actually believe, to some degree, that what you believe in is possible and is going to manifest. He will expect everything of others, but be willing to give little or nothing in return. He may begin with things, but will complete nothing. He will never reach decisions on anything if he can avoid it. And if he is forced to decide, he will reverse himself at the first opportunity. He will eat too much and exercise too little. He will criticize others who are succeeding in their chosen calling. In brief, the drifter will work harder to get out of thinking than most others work in earning a good living. The drifter is looking for ways to take advantage of people, take advantage of the system, to essentially fast track and fast talk unethically to get what they want. And they use their brain power to do that versus actually figuring out how to do it in a way that's going to be challenging for them and stimulating, because they don't have the self-confidence to believe, they don't have the self-confidence in themselves that they have the ability or they can acquire the ability. So thus they rather manipulate and control different elements unethically, including others. He will tell a lie rather than admit his arrogance on any subject. There's a big one. You'll see it. A lot of people just accept their reality and the laziness and the lack of self-discipline, and they'll lie saying that that's how they really want to live life and so forth. And you can tell that they're not really happy. And that's okay when someone's like that with you. Again, like I said, your job is not to convince them. Your job is to get success. Do not try to convince people. Just go out and get the success. If you're communicating to people on success principles, do it in a mastermind or speak to an audience that wants to hear it. A non-drifter. The first sign of a non-drifter is he is always engaged in doing something definite. Through some well-organized plan, which is definite, he has a major goal in life towards he is always working, and many minor goals, all of which lead to his central scheme. If you haven't already done so, watch Hero Dreams of Sushi. That's the example of a person that is a non-drifter. Purposeful towards the art of making sushi. Okay? Masterful and dedicated all the time. Hero Dreams of Sushi is a great movie to inspire you to start thinking that way towards your own craft, your own purpose. I believe that all of you should have a purpose that you are as focused and as disciplined as Hero is about sushi. The tone of his voice, the quickness of his step, the sparkle in his eyes, the quickness of his decisions clearly mark him as a person who knows exactly what he wants and is determined to get it, no matter how long it may take or what price he must pay. He will be found up front wherever he's playing the game or fighting a war. One of my favorite sayings is, you go first. You go first. That means that you get in the front lines. You go in the trenches. You get into the arena first. Don't wait for anyone else. Go first, because there is a lot of opportunity for those that are willing to go first. Those that go first get the lion's share of the opportunity. That's what you'll find. If he doesn't know what the answers are, he will say so frankly. Okay? It's not about ego. I don't know the answers. What do I need to do? He never blames others for his mistakes, no matter if they deserve the blame. Because who cares? Who really cares at the end of the day if the moment, like, you're wasting time when you blame somebody else? Why not just dedicate your time towards the next action on your task list? Like, your job, again, is not to convince people. Speak to the audience that wants to hear it and take action towards creating the results you want. That's it. He is an inspiration to all who come in contact with his mind. The major distinguishing feature of the non-drifter is this: He has a mind of his own and uses it for all purpose. So, key distinctions for this. Have a mind of your own, yes, and use it for everything and be mindful and filter everything you hear, including what I'm saying. Everything needs to be filtered to see if it fits into your reality. And likewise, be open and accepting of other people's opinions and viewpoints also. Okay, just be open-minded, because you don't know. In some situation, they might be right about their opinion. What is the very first step a drifter must take to break the habit? The self-defense can be applied through these simple methods. Number 1, do your own thinking on all occasions. Next, decide definitely what you want in life and create a plan for attaining it. And be willing to sacrifice everything else if necessary, rather than accept permanent defeat. Analyze temporary defeat. Okay? All defeat is temporary, all of it, and can be analyzed unless you die from it or something like that. But that's an extreme case. Be willing to render useful service equivalent to the value of all material things you deem of life, and render that service first. Recognize that your brain is a receiving set that can be attuned to receive communications from the universal storehouse of infinite intelligence to help you transmute your desires into their physical equivalent. Recognize that your greatest asset is time, the only thing except the power of thought which you own outright, and the one thing which can be shaped into whatever material things you want. Budget your time so none of it is wasted. None of it is wasted. Recognize the truth that fear generally is a filler with the devil, in which the devil occupies the unused portion of your mind. It is only a state of mind which you can control by filling the space it occupies with faith in your ability to make life provide you with whatever you demand of it. When you pray, do not beg. Demand what you want and insist upon getting that exactly with no substitutes. Recognize that life is a cruel taskmaster and that either you master it or it masters you. There is no halfway compromising point. Never accept from life anything you do not want. If that which you do not want is temporarily forced upon you, you can refuse in your own mind to accept it, and it will make way for a other thing you do want. Lastly, remember that your dominating thoughts attract through a definite law of nature, by the shortest and most convenient route, their physical counterpart. Be careful what your thoughts dwell upon. So, I conclude from what you say that drifting and procrastination are the same. Is that true? Yes, that is correct. Any habit which causes one to procrastinate, to put off reaching a definite decision, leads to the habit of drifting. So ask yourself, what are you procrastinating on right now? If there are things that you are procrastinating on, you are further wiring the habit of drifting, allowing yourself to be influenced negatively, and it's going to set you back further. You're better off addressing that in some shape or form rather than leaving it in a procrastinated state. What brief message would you send to the typical drifter if you wished to cure him of this evil habit? Some form of useful service to as many people as possible. Some form of useful service to as many people as possible. This is why I'm a huge fan of entrepreneurship. In entrepreneurship, you have that ability. If you don't want to be an entrepreneur, you could still apply the entrepreneurial spirit and philosophy in your career, in what you do, in your art. Because the reality is that in entrepreneurship, your goal is to reach as many people as possible to give them value. That's what it's about, to give them value. And by challenging yourself to do that, you prevent yourself from drifting. What preparation must one undergo before becoming able to move with definiteness of purpose at all times? One must gain mastery over self. This is the second of the 7 principles. The person who is not master of himself can never be a master of others. Lack of self-mastery is of itself the most destructive form of indefiniteness. I always say, if you want to be a good leader, you go first. Do the things that you tell others to do. I personally, and I don't think anyone has any respect for a leader or claims to be a leader who doesn't take the actions that they say others should do. Nowadays, more and more people are waking up and seeing through the nonsense of leaders who just impose themselves with fancy titles. A real leader is consistent, and if they make mistakes and they're inconsistent, they go to resolve it right away. They try to address it as fast as possible, recognizing that it's okay to make mistakes. And as an example to others, through demonstration, through action, they correct the mistake right away. Mastering the 3 appetites responsible for most of one's lack of self-discipline. So let's talk about this. The desire for food. The majority of people are so weak in self-discipline, they fill their stomachs with a combination of rich foods which please the taste, but overwork the organs of digestion and elimination. They pour into their stomachs both quantity and combinations of food, which the body chemist can dispose of only by converting the food into deadly, toxic poisons. These poisons clog and stagnate the body sewer system until it slows down in its works of elimination of waste matter. After a while, the sewer system stops working altogether, and the victim has what he calls constipation. By that time, he is ready for the hospital. Auto-intoxication, a body sewer poisoning, takes the machinery of the brain and rolls it into something resembling a wad of putty. The victim then becomes sluggish in his physical movements and mentally irritable and fussy. If he could only take one good look at and one bad smell of his sewer system, he would be ashamed to look himself in the face. So a question was asked, what happens if your victim fools you and gets his hands on a lot of money? How is this related? We'll talk about it in a moment. You don't fill his mind with fear of poverty then, do you? I take over the space by filling with something else which serves my purpose just as well. If my victim converts his desire for money into large sums, I'll start feeding him with large things that he can buy with it. For example, I will cause him to stuff himself with rich foods. That slows down his thinking and his capacity, endangers his heart, and starts him on the road to drifting. Okay? So that is interesting. Someone starts on a journey, they come from a place of poverty, they might not be able to afford the rich, unhealthy foods, starts acquiring wealth, and then begins to drift by eating the rich and fatty foods. So there are many ways that you can be entrapped into drifting. And this is why I believe in the philosophy of consistency in your eating and ensuring that no matter what level you are at, you eat what's required for your purpose, whatever your purpose is, your fitness goals and so forth, and you do it for the purpose of consuming the food. Yeah, it can taste good, but you don't want to overdevelop that palate to the point where all you want is to be satisfied by richness of the food. And by say develop the palate, I'm not talking about nuance for tastes of foods, of healthy foods, but rather develop a palate for fattiness and richness of food. And this can be reprogrammed. You can program yourself to enjoy certain foods. I know I've done that personally, and thus maintain control of your desire to want to eat the fatty foods or the junk foods or whatever else, which you'll be able to afford when you create more wealth for yourself, but you'll not have a desire to have. Next is the desire for expression of sex. Just what damage is there in overindulgence of sex? The greatest damage is that it depletes a man's resources, greatest driving force, and wastes without adequate compensation a man's creative energy. It dissipates energy needed by nature to maintain physical health. Sex is nature's most therapeutic force. It depletes the magnetic energy, which is the source of an attractive and pleasing personality. It removes the sparkle from one's eye and sets up discord in the tone of one's voice and destroys enthusiasm, subdues ambition, and leads inevitably to a habit of drifting on all subjects. I am very big on this area. Very, very big on this area. Most of society is going to say otherwise. I disagree with most of society. We're taught to just be promiscuous and depleting in our sexual energy because the very act of doing that makes us open for drifting. So we're easier to be recruited as drifters when we do that. However, it takes a high level of self-confidence, self-discipline to not be promiscuous with your sexual energy and to channel it towards sexual transmutation. That's covered extensively in Think and Grow Rich. So, how can one master the emotion of sex? Sexual transmutation, essentially. By the simple process of transmuting that emotional into some form of activity other than copulation. Sex is the most greatest of all forces which motivate human beings. Because of this fact, it is also one of the most dangerous forces. If humans could control their sex desires and transmute them into a driving force with which to carry on their occupation, that is, if they spent on their work one half the time they dissipate in pursuit of sex, they would never know poverty. Very interesting. And then finally, desire to express loosely organized opinions. The habit of expressing loosely organized opinions is one of the most destructive of habits. Its destructiveness consists of its tendency to influence people to guess instead of searching for the facts when they form opinions, create ideas, or organize plans. Most people do not want to look at the complexity. Now, I'm going to use business examples. There are those that are privileged at higher levels, and they don't necessarily want to understand how the lower levels work for varying degrees, varying angles, and as a result, their laziness causes the business to fail. If you want to be masterful in business, you have to learn, appreciate, and understand as many components of the business from many different levels as possible. Once you start to do that, and then you see how the whole system works, then you can form your opinions that are accurate. Because when I talk to people like this, they have these theories that make no sense, and they think they do, and they try to convince others, which again comes from drifting or their lack of understanding of how they're influenced by the devil to drift others through loosely organized opinions. And we don't want to be like that. We want to form opinions based on experience and communicate the experience and ideas in an organized way through knowledge and understanding and wisdom. And we want to make sure that we remove ourselves from situations where our mind is being poisoned by those that have loosely organized opinions. The habit develops a grasshopper mind, one that jumps from one thing to another but never completes anything. You'll notice it with these types. Okay, they jump from one thing to another and they'll never complete anything. Once they start to grow, because they're not bad people, they just don't realize they're doing it, then they'll start completing stuff and then they'll start to change, which will produce results themselves. They're essentially not drifting anymore. And of course, carelessness in the expression of opinion leads to the habit of drifting. From there, it is only one step or two until one is bound by the hypnotic rhythm, which automatically prohibits accurate thinking. We'll talk about that in a moment, the hypnotic rhythm. But isn't it true that a magnetic speaker often puts himself in the way of opportunity to benefit himself by attracting attention of others through his powers of oratory? Yes, a magnetic orator does have an asset of tremendous value in his ability to impress people by his speech, but he cannot make the best use of this asset if he forces his speech onto others without their invitation. You'll see this a lot. People that appear to be very knowledgeable, and a lot of times they are, forcing their opinions and discussions on others without invitation or consent. All they're doing is contributing to drifting. No single quality adds more to one's personality than the ability to speak with emotional feeling, force, and conviction. But the speaker must not impose his speech upon others without being invited to do so. There is an odd saying that nothing is worth more than its actual cost. This applies as well to the free, uninvited expression of opinions as to material things. So, resist the urge to want to preach to others and only communicate to those that want to hear your message, number one. Number two, be cautious and aware of people that do that, and understand that they may not know what they're talking about because they care more about gratifying their own ego than really helping you understand. Tell me all about your use of flattery in gaining control over people. Flattery is bait, incomparable value to all incomparable value to all who wish to gain control over others. It has powerful pulling qualities because it operates through two of the most common human weaknesses: vanity and egotism. There's a certain amount of vanity and egotism in everyone. In some people, these qualities are so profound, or so I say, so pronounced, that literally serve as a rope by which one may be bound. The best of all ropes is flattery. Flattery is the chief bait through which men seduce women. Sometimes, in fact, frequent women use the same bait to gain control of men, especially men who cannot be mastered through sex appeal. I teach its use to both men and women. Flattery is the chief bait with which my agents weave their way into the confidence of people from whom they procure information needed to carry on warfare. Wherever anyone stops to feed his vanity on flattery, I move in and begin to build another drifter. Non-drifters are not easily flattered. I inspire people to use flattery in every human relationship where it's possible, because those who are influenced by it become easy victims of the drifting habit. So, building the important understanding of, if you are looking for validation or approval from others, just as easily as they can give it to you, they can take it away. And when they don't give it to you anymore, you'll be desperate to seek it. All your validation and approval should come from within, and should come as a net result of you knowing that you're following a definite purpose. If you can do that, then the likelihood of flattery pulling you and leading you astray is going to be lower. Next, let's talk about adversity. One of my most cleverest tricks for mind control is fear. I plant the seed of fear in the minds of people, and as these seeds germinate and grow through use, I control the space they occupy. The 6 most effective fears are the fear of poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love, old age, and death. So let's talk about the fear of failure. Fear of failure, because this is very important. Fear of failure is probably the thing that prevents us from taking action the most, other than anything else. Failure is a man-made circumstance. It's never really real until it has been accepted by man as permanent. Stating it another way, failure is a state of mind. Therefore, it is something an individual can control until he neglects to exercise this privilege. Nature does not force people to fail, but nature does impose her law of hypnotic rhythm upon the minds, and through this law gives permanency to the thoughts which dominate those minds. In other words, failure thoughts are taken over by the law of hypnotic rhythm and made permanent if the individual accepts the circumstance as being permanent failure. That same law just as readily takes over and makes permanent thoughts of success. So fear of failure is the area that we want to study and understand, because the reality is that failure is, in a lot of times, the pivotal point, the point where we optimize, the point where we go back and we look back critically on the actions we take and understand our either lack of understanding or lack of consistency or many different variables. However, the meaning that we give to it is very important. If you look at failure as optimization, then you're moving forward. If you look at failure as something that is getting you closer to giving up or causes you to give up, then eventually you're going to make that a habit that you apply to other areas of your life, and it will lead you down a pathway of total acceptance of failure from the perspective of defeat and giving up. And internally, you'll know this is not the right thing, and you will open up the door for even further levels of drifting. So we absolutely must, since it's a pivotal point, must reassociate the meaning we have with failure. We must give it an empowering meaning. Now, the empowering meaning is that failure is just a calibrator. It is just telling you where you are after you've taken the action. It has no other meaning other than raw data for optimization. You claim there's a virtue in failure. That does not seem reasonable. Why do you try to induce people to fail if there is a virtue in failure? A, or the answer, there is no inconsistency in my claims. The appearance of inconsistency is due to your lack of understanding. Failure is virtue only when it does not lead one to quit trying and begin drifting. I induce as many people as I can to fail as often as possible for that reason, that not 1 out of 10,000 will keep trying after failing 2 or 3 times. I'm not concerned about the few who convert failures into stepping stones because they belong to my opposition anyway. They are the non-drifters, and therefore they are beyond my reach. So the key here is outwitting the devil by being consistent and persistent on moving forward towards success by embracing failure. A good video to watch is the video that I did on Go for No. Go for No. It's a very powerful book, and the discussion that I did on it will complement it nicely to help you understand that if you rewrite the meaning for the word no and you rewrite the meaning for failure, then you're in a very powerful position. If you want the real significance of adversity, let's talk about adversity, failure, and defeat, and all other experiences which break up a human's being's habits and force them to form new habits, watch nature at her work. Nature uses illness to break up physical rhythm of the body when the cells and organs become improperly related. She uses economic depressions to break the rhythm of mass thought when great numbers of people become improperly related thought, business, social, and political activities. She uses failure to break the rhythm of negative thought when an individual becomes improperly related to himself and his own mind. Observe carefully, and you will see that everywhere in nature there is always at work a natural law which gives eternal change to all matter, all energy, and to the power of thought. The only permanent thing in the universe is change. So if that's the way it is, if it's really like that, then why wouldn't we embrace change? Why wouldn't we say change is actually a good thing because that's an alignment thing, and thus by accepting change, we will A, accept the understanding that we can let go and move into a higher level of optimization. B, by change, we essentially are moving forward with a perspective of opportunity that shows up as a result of the change, because that change creates new opportunity. And then also by accepting change as a good thing, then what we could do is we can get excited when change happens, unlike a lot of people who fear change, and we could use it as an exercise to move forward and take actions based on the changes that happen as optimized action that move us forward to the results. And if we fail in those areas, then we've rewritten the meaning of failure, so we just repeat the process, thus aligning ourselves with nature. Understanding that nature changes all the time, that's fine. We've aligned ourselves with it by accepting it. And then rapidly taking action and failing in the process, yes, but then optimizing based on the failure. We're essentially surfing with nature. Let's talk about fear of adversity. Fear of adversity. Learning from adversity is the third of the 7 principles, but few people know that every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. Still fewer people know the difference between temporary defeat and failure. If this knowledge were generally known, I would be deprived of one of my strongest weapons to control other or over human beings. So, what is the greatest benefit one may receive through adversity? The greatest benefit of adversity is that it may, and generally does, force one to change one's thought habits, thus breaking and redirecting the force of hypnotic rhythm. So let's take a moment and talk about hypnotic rhythm. It's essentially through repetition and the acceptance of the repetition of behaviors and thought processes in a certain way become what is known as hypnotic rhythm, and to the individual almost impossible to break because it is so powerful that it has control over him. And when joined together with other people, it creates a collaborative group hypnotic rhythm or group think. And when large masses of people do that same thing, whether it's positive or negative, it becomes group, society, large, planetary, universal, you could say, hypnotic rhythm. The only way to break the negative habits is to accept adversity as part of the process of growth, which is in alignment with change, and understanding that through the failure and adversity that shows up during your journey of the definitive purpose lies opportunities for optimizations that's going to move you forward towards your goal, should you be able to take the presence and awareness required and apply it to A, looking for the optimizations, and B, to actually take action on those optimizations rapidly, and thus creating new patterns of how things work. And in the process, others will start to follow suit. This is how new innovations and inventions happen. But it will not happen if you are roadblocked by adversity and failure, and they either set you back in the short term, because remember, we don't have a contract to live forever. So the longer you are set back by fear or adversity or failure, the less likely you're going to hit your goal at the end of the day. And the faster you can move forward, the higher the likelihood you're going to hit your goal, and then you can move on to other things. But not only that, you can inspire others in the process. Is that all one might learn from adversity, defeat, and failure? No, that is the least of what one might learn. I hate to tell you this, but failure often serves as a blessing in disguise because it breaks the grip of hypnotic rhythm and frees the mind for a fresh start. Okay? Most of us live life guided by the hypnotic rhythm in a lull, in a daze, in a routine. Now, if it's a positive routine and filled within it are elements that cause you to do things differently and break free of the hypnotic rhythm, then you got a powerful combination. A, from the optimal behaviors that you're doing that have been done through repetition, and B, through the various activities that break the rhythm that you are doing from a psychological level and a conceptual level that allows you to see how you can optimize the routine and new opportunities, so then new elements that become now your new highest and best use become part of your awareness. So that was number 3. Number 4 is controlling environmental influences. Controlling environmental influences. So we spoke a bit about hypnotic rhythm. Let's talk about this. What is hypnotic rhythm, and how do you use it to gain permanent mastery over human beings? Any impulse of thought that the mind repeats over and over through habit forms an organized rhythm. Undesirable habits can be broken. They must be broken before they assume the proportions of rhythm. Are you following me? Well, to continue, rhythm is the last stage of habit. Any thought of physical moment which is repeated over and over through the principle of habit finally reaches the proportion of rhythm. Then the habit cannot be broken because nature takes it over and it makes it permanent. It is something like a whirlpool of water. Whirlpool in water. An object may keep floating indefinitely unless it is caught in a whirlpool. Then it's carried round and round but cannot escape. The energy with which people think may be compared to the water, or compared with water in a river. So another quote from the book, we want to discuss this further, is about character. a lot of us make the mistake and we assume that our character is permanent. Okay, when we look at these personality analysis and all these different tools out there, we say that's how we are and that's absolute. The truth is that the character is nothing more but a manifestation of the law of hypnotic rhythm. Therefore, when speaking of one's character, it would be proper to say his thoughts, habits have been crystallized into a positive or negative personality through hypnotic rhythm. One is good or bad because of the knitting together of his thoughts and deeds through hypnotic rhythm. One is bound by poverty or blessing with abundance because his aims, plans, and desires or lack of them have been made permanent by real hypnotic rhythm. So how do you create positive hypnotic rhythm? Well, my opinion is look at all the things in your environment, and that's the point we're talking about. Let's look at relationships, your ideologies, and different areas of your life that are not in alignment towards your chief definite aim, your purpose, your definite purpose, and all the sub-purposes that flow from the main purpose. Look at all those areas that are not in alignment and remove them. Remove them. Or if you can't remove them, figure out how to deal with just elements of that particular aspect. For example, dealing with people. If you can't remove certain people out of your life, how do you focus with dealing with only the certain elements within those people that are in alignment with your purpose, and pretty much everything else they can do elsewhere with someone else or whatnot? The key to dealing with people is not necessarily dealing with the person as a whole, but learning what aspects to deal with the person, and then only deal in those aspects of the person, whatever their skills and highest and best uses are, and contribute to that by adding mutual benefit towards a win-win outcome. Okay? So let's actually talk about relationships then, because I believe that relationships play a huge role when it comes to how we think and how we see reality. If you're around people that are at the level that you aspire to be at, your job is to not to try to bring them down into your level, but to stay open and observe their patterns of behavior, understand their ideologies and philosophies, why they do things, when they do things, all the different components. Stay open and absorb that into your subconscious mind. When it goes into your subconscious mind, it will rewrite the programming and cause you, if they're purposeful, to drift less or lose your drifting. For example, I only associate with people that are clear on their definite purpose. Now, that doesn't mean I don't talk to people. I associate with the people that I associate with predominantly because I don't have a large group of friends, but those that I'm very close with have to be in their mode of purpose, and they have to be clear in what it is. And those that, I talk to just when I'm out and about or just connect with here and there, I just connect to the elements that are mutually the connects. So we might have a certain conversation, but I can't really get too close to that person because they might not understand the power of the subconscious mind, and they don't understand how we are actually influencing each other. And if what I have is what they want, then they can be influenced from that perspective. But if they have what I don't want, I'm not interested in being influenced from those perspectives. So clearly knowing what you want will allow you to determine the kind of relationships that you want and with who to have the relationships and to what degree you can have the relationships with each person, essentially how deep you can go with them. Because the deeper you go with a person, the more you're opening yourself up to the persuasion that occurs. And if they have been drifting, you're opening yourself up to drifting yourself. And you want to be really cautious and aware of that. The most important part of one's environment is that created by his association with others. All people absorb and take over, either consciously or unconsciously, the thought habits of those whom which they associate closely. What do you do with people whom you control before death? Of what good are they to you while they still live? So this is a very interesting distinction. I use them, or what is left of them, then after I take charge, as propagandists to help me prepare the minds of others to drift. Okay? So if you are around drifters, then they have been instilled with propaganda information to validate their drifting, in which they might not be aware that they are imposing on you. Very important distinction. So what's a proper relationship? Any relationship between two people which damages anyone or brings any form of, what's an improper relationship? Any relationship between people which damages anyone or brings any form of misery or unhappiness to any of the individuals. How can an improper relationship be corrected? By change of mind of the person causing the improper relationship, or by changing the persons to the relationship. Some minds harmonize naturally while others are just naturally clash. Successful human relationships, to endure as such, must be formed of minds that naturally harmonize, quite aside from the question of having common interests as a means of bringing them into harmony. When you speak of business leaders who succeed because they know how to pick men, you might more correctly say that they succeed because they know how to associate minds which harmonize naturally. Knowing how to pick people successfully for any definite purpose in life is based upon the ability to recognize the types of people whose minds naturally harmonize. So when you have a definite purpose and you have sub-definite purposes that contribute to the definite purpose, then your goal is to only associate with people that contribute to that. And if you have to associate with other people, then keep a caution, a level of awareness up to recognize that they will influence you to go in their direction. If they're not very self-aware of their ability to do so, they will strongly try to convince you and even get aggressive to move you into their direction. But you must be preemptive and understand where these people are who are forceful so you can avoid them, or if they're open to discussion, participate in the discussion, but not deep enough that it starts drifting you away from your pure purpose, your goal, your specific purpose, because they don't understand how they have been drifting. Okay? You can be around people that have different purposes than you, and you can have a very stimulating conversation that can enhance your purpose, provided they have a purpose. So one person might be interested in business, the other person might be interested in art. But if they have specific purposes based on definite purpose behind those two, then those minds are going to harmonize, because you can learn arguably even more from a person who sees reality different, who has a different purpose, but it's still purposeful, about the different components that exist in their reality. And you can figure out how to take what you learn from their reality and their different, essentially, thing that they want, their purpose, and all the steps of learning, of mastery that are universal, and some nuances based on environment that are different, and you can integrate that into what you're doing. But the key is to be cautious and aware when you're around people that are not definite on purpose, and understand the value behind people that are on definite purpose, and to choose your relationships accordingly. Exactly how do you convert human beings into propagandists and lure them into self-imprisonment? First, I make my entry into an individual's mind by bribing him. I use many things, all of them pleasant things that the individual covets. I use the same sort of bribes that individuals use when they bribe one another. That is, I use for bribes as the many things people want most. These are my bribes. Here they are. Love, the thirst for sexual expression. Covetousness, for money. The obsessive desire to gain something for nothing, like gambling. Vanity in women, egotism in men. In today's environment, clearly both men and women fall victim to both vanity and egotism. Desire to be the master of others. Desire for intoxicants and narcotics. Desire for self-expression through words and deeds. Desire to imitate others. Being a hero or a heroine. Desire for physical food. There's a lot of different ways that one can be lured into drifting. And then, since we're talking about relationships, go out as propagandists to get others to drift. A lot of times they have no idea what they're doing, that they're getting people to drift, but they become patriots in their drifting and go out and get other people to drift because they see it as the normal way of being. You, on the other hand, need to be present and aware when someone is drifting and masquerading their drifting in any one of these areas here. Or they were lured into drifting through one of these areas, such as love. They could have been lured into a relationship that was bad for them, but because they fell in love with the person, that person was a drifter, and now they've accepted drifting as the norm. Okay, a lot of creative ways one can be witted by the devil. So next, he talks about how children and schools work, or I should say parents and even schools instill drifting at children at a very young age. I cause children to become drifters by following the example of their parents, most of whom I have already taken over and bound eternally to my cause. In some parts of the world, I gain mastery over children's minds and subdue their willpower in exactly the same way that men break and subdue animals of lower intelligence. It makes no difference to me how a child will be subdued. As long as it fears something, I will enter its mind through that fear and limit the child's power to think independently. So a couple things here. The devil does not want you to develop willpower. What's interesting is that I find that in today's world, not a lot of emphasis is put on building willpower, developing willpower. Is there a subject in school on how to build willpower? I don't see it. It's such an important skill. The discipline to do what you know you have to do, whether you feel like it or not, is a valuable skill if it contributes to the outcome. The discipline to do what you have to do, whether you feel like it or not, to produce the outcome is one of the most valuable skills you can have. Most people look for easy routes or easy way out, the easy button, and they never have an opportunity to develop their willpower. They don't even work to develop their willpower, so as a result, they're constantly giving in to eating the junk food, not exercising, and doing all kinds of things that could have been prevented had they had the willpower to prevent themselves from doing things. That's why I recommend entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is a place where you can develop willpower, because you essentially move polarizing to the rest of the world, and you have to discipline yourself to make sure you do things on time, focus on highest and best use. There's a lot of dynamics in play. You cannot just give up at the end of the day at 5 p.m. and go home like with most careers. And you know what? Even if you have a career, to have the entrepreneurial mindset is and instill and essentially work with the different elements of entrepreneurship is a way of building willpower. Another way is exercise or delaying gratification when it comes to eating certain foods. Following a healthy diet is a form of building willpower. After a while, it gets so automatic that you don't need your willpower. And the truth is, and the key is, always look for things that you can do every day that build your willpower further. Even stretching the limits of your physical exercise is a form of exercise on your willpower, and it develops your willpower. Next, let's talk about money, because money is an important element when it comes to environment. So I've always understood that money was the root of all evil, that the poor and the meek would inherit heaven, while the wealthy would pass into your hands. What do you have to say about that claim? A man who knows how to get the material things of life generally knows how to keep out of the hands of the devil as well. The ability to acquire things is contagious. Drifters can't acquire nothing except that which no one else wants. If more people had definite aims and stronger desires for material and spiritual riches, I would have fewer victims. So again, the discipline of creating wealth, whether it's through entrepreneurship or leveling yourself up in your career, takes work, takes discipline, takes definite of purpose, and you are less likely to drift as a result of that. So those that say that money is the root of all evil, a lot of times have no idea how money works. They fail to recognize that you get money based on the value you create for others. And that creation of value takes work, takes discipline, takes focus, takes the ability to learn specialized skills, to dedicate as much as you can time-wise, opportunity cost-wise, resource-wise, to perfecting your craft, to studying the audience, figuring out what their needs are. Like, the list goes on and on and on. All that takes work, and it's a definite purpose-based project. Thus, the net result of that, when you stay on the course for that, as you create a lot of value for others, and you get paid well for it. And if you keep doing that, you contribute to others and you also gain from it. There's nothing evil about that. What has the manner in which money is acquired to do with its being a blessing or a curse? Everything. If you don't believe me, take a look at those who acquire a large amount of money quickly, without time to get wisdom along with it, and observe how they use it. Why do you suppose rich men's sons seldom equal the achievement of their fathers? I'll tell you why. It's because they have been deprived of the self-discipline which comes from being forced to work. Again, willpower, self-discipline, forcing yourself to do things. People don't like to hear that. They want it easy. But you gotta force yourself to do the things, because that's how you stay away from drifting. Okay? You can set up systems that makes it easy, but the systems are not there. You have to do what it takes to get yourself to do the thing, whatever you gotta do to produce the results. Look into the records of moving picture stars, calls it moving pictures, stars or athletes who suddenly find themselves in possession of big money and hero worship and praise from the public. Observe how quickly I move in and take them over, in many cases mainly through sex, gambling, food, and liquor. With these, I catch and control the biggest and the best of people as soon as they get their hands on big money. So someone can essentially not drift and be focused, acquire a lot of success, monetary success, only to find themselves drifting. What does this mean? This means this never ends. Like, this goes on forever. You have to constantly be outwitting the devil. And the more results you have, all is fair game. The devil will be used against you to lure you into drifting. What class of people control their environmental influences? The non-drifters. All who are victims of habit of drifting forfeit their power to choose their own environment. They become the victims of every negative influence of their environment. So again, the way to control your environment is to prevent yourself from drifting by observing the influences of the people around you in your environment and making decisions accordingly. Next is time. Time is important. Time divides all thought habits into two classes, negative thoughts and positive thoughts. One's individual thoughts are, of course, constantly changing and being recombined to suit the individual's desires. But thoughts do not change from negative to positive or vice versa, except through voluntary effort on the part of the individual. Time penalizes the individual for all negative thoughts and rewards him for all positive thoughts, according to the nature and purpose of the thoughts. If one's dominating thoughts are negative, time penalizes the individual by building in his mind the habit of negative thinking and then proceeds to solidify this habit into permanency every second of its existence. Positive thoughts are likewise woven by time into permanent habits. The term permanency, of course, refers to the natural life of the individual. In the strict sense of the term, nothing is permanent. Time converts thought habits into what might be called permanency during the life of the individual. So it's really just time that we want to work with to produce the neural pathways, the programming, the habits of success. And we have to make a decision, like right now. Do we want to support our positive thoughts or give in to our negative thoughts? And the decision is compounded with time based on the actions that flow from the thoughts that we have. And the more actions we take from the positive perspective, the more it'll become habit, and then compounded with time will cause you to not drift and add up walls of defenses and be able to be sharper, allow you to be sharper so you can pick up on the areas where you would be likely to drift, and you can be more preemptive, you can think long range, and you can outwit the devil even more so. But if you go down a negative route, then you're leaving more gaps, more opening to be bombarded by negativity, and further witting by the devil. Time is nature's seasoning influence through which human experience may be ripened into wisdom. People who are not born with wisdom, but they are born with the capacity to think, and they may, through the lapse of time, think their way into wisdom. So the key is developing wisdom with time. So what is wisdom? Wisdom is the ability to relate yourself to nature's laws so that it makes as to make them serve you, and the ability to relate yourself to other people so as to gain their harmonious, willing cooperation in helping you make life yield whatever you demand of it. Then accumulated knowledge is not wisdom? Great heavens, no. If knowledge was wisdom, the achievements of science would not have been converted into implements of destruction. So the key to recognize is that you can have a lot of theoretical knowledge. You can understand how a lot of things work. But if you're not taking action, you're not really converting your thoughts into real wisdom. Real wisdom is experienced through, knowledge and some theory, but through living it and experience through time. What is needed to convert knowledge into wisdom? Time plus the desire for wisdom. Wisdom is never thrust upon one. It is acquired, if at all, by positive thinking through voluntary effort. Positive thinking gets you to find your definite purpose. While you're on definite purpose, you're taking action through holding on to positive thinking, developing the willpower, self-discipline, and voluntary effort of doing the things that move you further towards your definite purpose. And through that process, you acquire theory, knowledge, and wisdom. And then when you compound that with time, that's how a person becomes wise. Do youths ever possess wisdom? Only in very elementary matters. Wisdom comes only through the lapse of time. It cannot be inherited, and it cannot be imparted from one person to another except through the lapse of time. Those that have not acquired wisdom through time might come across information even like this at an early age and think they know what they're talking about, but it's really just doing it day in and day out repeatedly for years that will help you to understand the nuances and the variation of different components and elements and protect you to not drift from the many different possible scenarios that you could drift if you don't understand the deep magnitude of this wisdom, of this knowledge based on wisdom. So that's why I mentioned earlier, Bob Proctor and a lot of great people who had a lot of success read books like Think and Grow Rich over and over again and do so for many years, because it is through the repetition of reading the books and then taking action on the information and reflecting upon the action that when they go back to the book, it's like reading a whole new book, and they pick up elements that weren't there before because now their wisdom is leveled up, and that happens through time. It is delusional to think that at a young age you could just read Think and Grow Rich and everything will change. That may happen for a small group of people, but most likely that's not going to happen. You have to put time on your side, and you have to start by dedicating that time today. Does the lapse of time force an individual to acquire wisdom? No, wisdom comes only to non-drifters who form positive thought habits as a dominating force in their lives. Drifters are those whose dominating thoughts are negative, never acquire wisdom except of a very elementary nature. So if someone is older, it does not make them wiser. It is how much they have stayed away from drifting. Someone who's at the age of 30 can be wiser than someone who's at the age of 60 because that person at 30 was drifting less. Since a lot of people are drifters or predominantly drift, those who claim that they have more wisdom because they're older don't necessarily know what they're talking about. You just have to look at their results. They do not look the part, they do not act the part, and they do not have the results. Doesn't make them bad people, it just means that they have been drifting. Now, when they start making peace with this and they accept that they are drifting and they've drifted in their life, they can change things around, and you can acquire knowledge rapidly, because usually in later stages in life, you're not driven by a lot of the curiosity that you have at the earlier stages. So it's fine to acquire this knowledge and practice it at a later stage in life. And if you're acquiring this knowledge now, it's important to start now, because the more you wait, the more you're going to form the habit of continuous drifting and wiring those patterns, and the less wisdom you'll be accumulating in the process. Next, let's talk about harmony. Acting with definiteness of purpose to become the dominating influence in your mental, spiritual, and physical environment. Throughout nature, one may find evidences that all natural law moves in orderly manner through the law of harmony. Through the operation of this law, nature forces everything within the range of a given environment to become harmoniously related. Understand this truth, and you will catch a new and more intriguing version of the power of environment. You will understand why any association with negative minds is fatal to those seeking self-determination. Okay, so if you want to accelerate your journey, you must harmonize with others that are aware of this understanding and knowledge and are motivated to outwit the devil themselves. And if they're not aware of this knowledge, but they kind of follow it and are kind of, doing these things and bringing this knowledge to their awareness, they accept it. And when you work with them, you create that mastermind, then things are going to start moving forward. But you cannot associate with people that have negative minds. If you can't remove the negative minded people out of your life, then like I said earlier, associate with just aspects of them and keep everything else at bay. Do you mean the nature voluntary forces human beings to harmonize with the influences of their environment? Yes, that is true. The law of hypnotic rhythm forces upon every living thing the dominating influences of the environment in which it exists. If nature forces human beings to take on the nature of the environment in which they live, what means of escape are available to people who find themselves in an environment of poverty and failure but desire to escape? They must change their environment or remain poverty-stricken. Nature permits no one to escape the influences of his environment. The environment is so powerful. Social proof is so powerful. Your subconscious mind is constantly absorbing elements from your environment and believing it to be real. If you have negativity in your environment, your subconscious mind is programming you, it's causing you to drift, and it is opening you up for all kinds of negative influences that match. However, nature, in her abundance of wisdom, has given to every normal human being the privilege of establishing his own mental, spiritual, and physical environment. But once he establishes it, he must become a part of it. This is the inexorable working of the law of harmony. In business associations, for example, who establishes the dominating influence that determines the rhythm of the environment? It's the individual or individuals who think and act with definiteness of purpose. You see, everything comes down to your definiteness of purpose. That's the number one point. When you start to have definite purpose, which is the key point of Think and Grow Rich, essentially knowing exactly what you want and having a burning desire. Once you start doing that, these other things start to avail themselves to you. They show up in your awareness, and you start to accumulate more knowledge and insights. You come across new videos like this and comments, and when I say comments, I mean content and books and different kinds of information that cause you to develop all the sub-elements related to acquiring that purpose. But you must start with a definite purpose and the burning desire to chase that definite purpose, to seek it all the way till the end, to make it your life purpose. Isn't overcaution, talking about caution now, which is 7 point, isn't overcaution as detrimental as lack of caution? There's no such thing as overcaution. What you call overcaution is the expression of fear. Fear and caution are two entirely different things. So what we're talking about here is critical thinking, not blind faith. Have faith that your vision is going to become a reality, that your purpose is going to become a reality. Have faith that there are powers that are keeping you away from drifting, away from the devil. Understand that that is true. And while that's happening, you also have to use your brain. You also have to think and think critically and observe and study, and you cannot bypass this. If you bypass this, if you do not develop your ability to be rational and calculated and understand implications, cause and effects, you're leaving yourself open for negative influence and drifting. You're leaving yourself up for gray areas in your life. The most dangerous human trait is lack of caution. Lack of caution is a result of lack of not thinking critically. Caution is not negative. It's being aware. It's looking at alternatives. It's when someone shares something with you to evaluate if it's valid or not, to look at their results, to study the different sources. It takes work, I know. It takes work. It's not just a matter of thinking positively and things showing up in your life. You have to follow all the principles, and you have to have the desire to challenge yourself to evolve your way of thinking by looking at things from short-term, medium-term, long-term perspective and understanding the implications. People drift into all sorts of hazardous circumstances because they do not exercise caution by planning the moves they make. A drifter always moves without exercising caution, acts on the whim, just does it, doesn't really think about the implications. And the implications from what a drifter does from that perspective of just acting on the whim causes more issues in which they have to resolve, and a lot of times they don't resolve, which causes them to drift even further. He acts first and thinks later, if at all. He does not choose his friends. He drifts along and allows people to attach themselves to him on their own terms. He does not choose an occupation. He drifts through school and is glad to get the first job that will give him food and clothing. He invites people to cheat him at trade by neglecting to inform himself of the rules of the trade. He invites illness by neglecting to inform himself of the rules of sound health. He invites poverty by neglecting to protect himself against the environmental influences of poverty-stricken. He invites failure at every step he takes by neglecting to exercise the caution to observe what causes people to fail. He invites fear in all its forms by his lack of caution in examining the causes of fear. He fails in marriage because he neglects to use caution in his choice of a mate. And he uses still less caution in his methods of relating himself to her after marriage. He loses his friends or converts them into enemies by his lack of caution in relating himself to them on a proper basis. So these 7 principles are very important if you want to learn how to outwit that part of you that is preventing you from getting the success that you want. And understand something, that it doesn't happen overnight. In fact, it might go on forever. Maybe you might get to enlightened status, but let's just say most of the population, 99.99999, is going to have to outwit the devil forever in this life. But these are the tools, and I recommend that you read the book because the tools will give you, or the information covered in the book is going to give you further depth and understanding as to the 7 principles that will help you. So let's review them again one more time just to hammer it home. Definiteness of purpose. You must have a clear, specific vision as to what you want in all areas of your life. You have to learn how to master yourself. Do not get pulled in from drifting. You have to embrace failure and adversity and rewrite the meaning. You got to control the environmental influences that surround you. You got to give it time. You got to do the above 4 things, compounded with time, to acquire wisdom and be in harmony with nature as a result. And while you're doing it, while you're doing all that, think critically. Constantly develop your critical thinking skills, because if you don't, there will be a weak area in which the devil will exploit. If you enjoyed this video and want a copy of the mind map, link is in the bottom of the description. I will talk to you soon. Take care.